This meeting of the G7 comes only a few days, only less than a week after the appalling attack using chemical weapons by the Assad regime, and then of course by the United States response to that attack. So what you've got here is the world coming together to try to support America in their response, and there's overwhelming support for what the US did, signaling that we will not tolerate the use of chemical weapons, the barbaric use of chemical weapons which were banned 100 years ago, and our support for efforts by Rex Tillerson to try to move the process forward and to try to use what I think is a very substantial opportunity now for us collectively to say to the Russians that, you know, they have a choice, and that choice is to stick like glue to the Assad regime with all that entails, that toxic regime that poisons its own people and indeed is poisoning the reputation of Russia, or to work with the rest of the world, everybody represented here at the G7, as well as the like-minded countries, Turkey, the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia and so on, to work with the rest of the world to find a solution for Syria, a political solution. And let me emphasize that that is what people are trying to achieve, a political solution.
Foreign Secretary, will there be a clear threat of sanctions against Russia in any message you collectively send with Mr. Tillerson to Moscow? Well,
I think, as you know, the United States have already imposed some extra sanctions themselves, and we will be discussing the possibility of further sanctions, certainly on some of the Syrian military figures, and indeed on some of the Russian military figures who have been involved in coordinating the Syrian military efforts and of course who are thereby contaminated by the appalling behavior of the Assad regime.
Foreign Secretary, the Russians are mocking you for not going to Moscow. Rex Tillerson was apparently happy for you to go. Why did the Prime Minister ask you not to go?
I think it's very important in these circumstances for the world to present a united front and for there to be absolutely no ambiguity about the message. And the message that we're sending to the Russians is very, very clear. Do they want to stick with a toxic regime? Do they want to be eternally associated with a guy who gasses his own people? Or do they want to work with the Americans and the rest of the G7 and indeed the like-minded countries for a new future for Syria? And that has got to be a political deal, and with the best will in the world, it is the Americans who have changed the game, James, by using those cruise missiles, which was never happened in the last 5 years. The game has now been changed, and I think it's important that that message should be heard from the Americans to the Russians.
Finally, the Russians have resisted all previous pressure to shift position. There's no reason to suppose they'll shift position now.
Well, you know, I think the Russians need a way out and a way forward. And if I think about the position of Vladimir Putin now, he's toxifying the reputation of Russia by his continual association with a guy who has flagrantly poisoned his own people. And I think that the world can see this. The evidence, by the way, is overwhelming. You should look at the evidence for what happened the other day. It is absolutely conclusive. And so what we're trying to do is to give Rex Tillerson the clearest possible mandate from us as the West, the UK, all our allies here, to say to the Russians, this is your choice. Stick with that guy, stick with that tyrant, or work with us to find a better solution.
Foreign Secretary,
thank you very much.